Artintheraw. This is episode 24. We're trying something a little bit different tonight. Usually, I'm your host, Ann Kelly, but tonight, I'm your guest, and we have a guest host. My friend Daniel / past guest Daniel suggested that maybe tonight we would try switching sides of the table. So I hope you enjoy. Thanks for joining us, Daniel. And so we're switching roles tonight, but I can't help but ask, why did you want to interview me?
With photography, as you know, normally when you make portraits of people, it's good to kind of sit on the other side every once in a while so you can know what it feels like.
That's fair, and I think will be useful. So
well, plus, who is Anne?
And your name is, for everybody.
My name is Daniel Gonçalves, or Americanized Daniel Gonçalves, and I will be your temporary host with the most.
That's right.
Where are you from originally?
I'm originally from Colorado, and I moved to Santa Fe a little over 20 years ago. Originally to go to art school, I studied photography at the College of Santa Fe and just really, really loved Santa Fe, and I'm still here.
And why did you choose to go to college in Santa Fe specifically? Why not somewhere else if you're in Colorado?
Well, I started studying photography pretty young. So by the time I graduated from high school, I was looking, I honestly couldn't think of anything else I would want to do in college other than study art and photography. And it was hard to find a photo program that had, had something to add that I hadn't already kind of delved into. And I'd always loved Santa Fe, New Mexico. And at the time, the College of Santa Fe was in the process of building the Marion Center for Photographic Arts. And David Scheinbaum was heading the program, and they had just tons of really amazing photo classes that were things that I hadn't studied as of yet. That, and I'd always loved Santa Fe. I'd visited many times before. And it also wasn't that far from home. I could still drive home and see my family pretty easily. So those are the main reasons.
And did you stay there continuously since college, or did you move back or go somewhere else since then, or have you been there since college?
Pretty much been here the whole time, with the exception of traveling.
And I understand that your mom was an avid photographer or enthusiast.
When I was growing up, my mom would always make a lot of photographs of us, which is not necessarily unusual. A lot of people photograph their children. But at a certain point, she started taking photography classes through the community college, and she shot mostly 35 millimeter and medium format film, and I became her model. And so it was watching her do that and being on the other side of the camera that made me want to pick up a camera. I was all in pretty early on.
What kind of stuff were you shooting? What were you into?
At the time, I was mostly photographing my friends. It's kind of a funny thing, and granted, we didn't have cell phone cameras in that day and age, but I have very, very few snapshotty photos from high school because most of the photos I took were with a 35 millimeter film camera. So I've got lots of pictures from high school. They're just not the type that most people have. I had a number of friends that I kind of started photographing regularly. My mom and I took this landscape photography class together, and it was a field experience class. So it was about a week-long car camping trip. And it was wild. It was really wild. And I definitely remember coming back from that and thinking photography is really cool. So
where did you guys go on your road trip?
Oh, I don't even remember. It was so I was living in Denver at the time. I know we drove through Silver City. We were on all these back roads. The kind of a funny story. The teacher that was teaching the class, I guess, had not really looked at, he'd been on this trail before, but he hadn't been recently, and there was a lot of snow and the roads were in way worse condition than he was aware of. And I think there was about 8 or 9 people in his class, and it was all women, and they were all driving their own vehicles. And at one point, we all had to cross a river, and none of these women were really into this idea. So he had to drive all of the vehicles through the river. And I couldn't tell you where that was, but we were up at the Continental Divide at one point. And even though it was car camping, you know, some of it was, we were pretty far out there. And I still remember driving through that river, or when he drove my mom's car through the river, and just this ocean wave of water just going over the windshield. And I don't know, there was
wow, this is like a full-on river.
yes. I'm sure he was a little stressed out.
So he would drive over the river. How would he get back? Would he like swim through it, or like it obviously not drive through it back and forth? So I'm assuming he had to.
I guess it wasn't that deep of a river. I mean, there's rivers and there's rivers. I think it was like an intermittent stream bed style river where he could kind of walk through it. But
he still got pretty wet though.
Yeah, I don't remember that part.
I'm sure he does if you ask him.
But I definitely remember coming back from that class, and I think that might have, I don't know, that might have been my junior year in high school, pretty early on. So I mean, that was just that was exciting and inspiring, and I just thought.
Do you have like a memorable picture from that trip that like kind of stuck with you? Something that you're kind of like that kind of just represents that on your mind, or was it just more like the experience?
I think the experience as a whole. I do have some pictures somewhere that I took at the Continental Divide. And it was during the summer, and there was still a lot of snow up there. I don't even know why that actual picture kind of comes to my mind, or where it is. But really, what I should have been doing was photographing the teacher driving through the river. That was memorable.
Well, you took a picture. It's just up here and not on paper somewhere. Yeah.
Exactly. So maybe one day I'll make that picture. I've just got to.
You just got to find them again and take 9 cars and be like, we're not going through.
Recreate.
And hope he forgot.
But I've been told by a lot of photographers, if there's a picture you meant to take and you didn't take it, or it didn't turn out the way you wanted, you'll eventually take it or make that picture, just maybe not in the way you had originally imagined it. So
yeah, that's true. And some pictures, I guess, I don't know, we all regret that. We'll be like, I wish I had taken this picture, that picture. Sometimes it's kind of like one that you take for yourself in your mind, and it gets to kind of be whatever you wanted it to be. You're like, I caught a fish that was this big. It's like, when it's in your mind, it could be like that big, you know?
Right.
It just changes. I mean, yeah.
Like you're asking how this guy's getting back and forth
across
the river.
He was catapulting, right? He's going like, yeah, for sure, pole vaulting it.
Probably pure adrenaline. He had no choice. He was responsible.
He's like, we're never gonna get out of here. Okay. That's wonderful to hear that your mom was so supportive and stuff. How was your dad with all that? Was he pretty supportive about going to college and studying arts and all that?
My whole family's been very supportive of all of that. I feel really lucky about that, because I definitely went to high school with a lot of kids who were really talented in the arts, and art school was not something that their parents were going to permit to happen. But I honestly don't know what else I would have done. There wasn't really anything else I cared about in high school enough to want to pursue it in college. That said, when I got to college, I did a liberal arts degree, and kind of choosing to be in school versus when you're in high school and you have to be in school. Right. I learned about lots of things in Western civilization and different classes that I could see at that point, that would have been a really cool thing to study. But I think it's the difference of wanting to be there, choosing to be there, versus you have to be there.
So you went for, was it like a degree in arts and photography, or was it like just kind of general liberal arts degree?
It was a BFA in photography, and at the time, the College of Santa Fe, which unfortunately no longer exists, they offered either a BA in photography or a BFA. And what the BFA required was that you took a beginning studio arts class in all mediums. And then you also had a senior thesis show prior to graduating.
And you've also done some different artwork that you've shared with me, and painting on wood and some mixed media stuff. Was Spark probably one of those classes, I would assume?
Actually, before I even ever started making photographs, I started drawing at a pretty young age. And believe it or not, I started, and I don't really do this anymore, but I started writing poetry before I could actually write. More specifically, I would come up with poems and my dad would write them down for me. I happen to have an uncle who, Dave Garrison, who is a poet and was a professor for quite some time. He's published a number of books, and I think when I was 3 or 4, he had one of my poems published in
Wow.
a university poetry book.
Kind of setting the bar high at such a young age. It's kind of hard to top that. You're like, oh God, where do I go from here?
Well, I talk about my dad being, yeah, supportive of even though he wasn't an artist. And I don't even know how I got started writing the poems. I mean, but he recorded them.
So you did all this cool stuff. You graduated college. You did your thesis show, and then what were you going to do after that? Were you just kind of like, what do I do? Or
Well, I mean, that was kind of the good part about being young was I wasn't too hung up on what I was going to do. The idea was to keep making art, of course, but I went from having my own private senior thesis darkroom to having no darkroom. So for a number of years, I just worked on my own art, and I bartended for a while and waited tables. I put on a number of independent art shows around Santa Fe, and most of them included my own artwork. There was an art show that I put on in a coffee shop in downtown Santa Fe, and I don't even remember how that came to be, if I just asked the coffee shop if I could do that. And then I had another friend who was putting on exhibitions in his home. He called it the Ottawa showroom. So he had an exhibition of my work there. We even made t-shirts. Some of my friends still have this t-shirt. And then there was a larger show that I put on that was in a warehouse that I rented for 48 hours, I think. And there was about 10 artists in that show, and live music and DJs, and it was more of an art party type of thing. But my friend Nicole, who now works for the Dallas Theater Center, she did all the lighting. So it was pretty professional in terms of just kind of pop-up art party shows.
nice.
So I think there's just certain things that
So you're like publishing at like when you're this tall, right? You're publishing in university presses, your poetry. And then you're like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna photography, go to school. Like you graduate, like, I don't know what I'm gonna do, but you started curating. So obviously it seems like you kind of like figure things out before you know you figure them out in some way, because you obviously had a knack for that and you started kind of gravitating towards that, it seems.
Yeah, I think I kind of just can't help but do those things. And actually, taking it back even a little bit further, when I was in elementary school, I would put on talent shows for the neighborhood. So I would be the organizer. I would, okay, we're having this talent show, and I would set it up, and also had a lot of haunted houses and carnivals. So I was just always the kid that was organizing these things. And why, I have no idea, but
That's kind of awesome, actually. Yeah.
over the years, I'm like, okay, I guess that's just what I do. So
You're like the art director for the neighborhood talent shows. I mean, yeah, you figured it out.
yeah,
It was just in
yeah.
you.
Yeah, I
So,
remember one of the carnivals we had like I don't know, there was a prize and you could win fish and there was all these carnival rides
fish.
that yeah, there I don't know
Like
why.
a can of sardines or like a goldfish?
Goldfish, yeah. We had goldfish. And my brother, he's 3 years younger than I am, so most of the guests at the carnival were my brother and his friends, but we had like I don't know why I remember this. There was a gate ride where the younger kid would go on the gate and my friends and I would like push the gate back and forth and we'd charge up 2 pennies or something like that. And
Nice.
I don't remember how you won the fish, but there was a fish prize. So
Maybe it was kind of like those bull riding things, like at the bars. Like if you stay on the gate, you like win a goldfish. If you fall off, you got to pay up your 2 cents again.
I don't think we were trying to knock them off, but not that I recall.
Liability reasons. So you're mindful of liability.
Possibly. So
Okay, so you went from carnival organizer to all this stuff, and then you ended up in the gallery world. So you're at Photo Eye and you're curating and representing photographic artists. And you've obviously got an entrepreneurial spirit, making 2 cents off of the gate ride.
yep.
And so, do you think that you would ever have the desire or want or in the future to open up your own gallery? Is that something you think you'd be interested in?
So I've been with Photo Eye for going on 15 years
Wow.
now. I love Photo Eye, so and I love our artists. At this point, I'm quite happy there.
Yeah.
It has so much history to it. It's really kind of an institution.
Beyond Santa Fe, I mean, it's
Mhm.
worldwide. I mean, it's fantastic to reach. You also get to go to portfolio reviews and represent the gallery. And how's that experience for you?
I've definitely enjoyed going to portfolio reviews, and I've met so many good friends. The San Francisco Photo Alliance, they've been putting on a portfolio review at the San Francisco Art Institute for, I think, about 13 or 14 years now, and I have
That's
been
cool.
to all of them except for the first one. So that one has kind of a special place for me. Linda
Wow.
Connor started the Photo Alliance. I mean, she's been teaching at the San Francisco Art Institute for more than 40 years now, and she started the Photo Alliance, and they do a lot of great programming throughout the year. So the Bay Area has become kind of a special place for me for that reason.
So at portfolio reviews, there's always kind of like these unwritten rules of like things that you should and shouldn't do. So
Mhm.
anything memorable of like something that someone did that surprised you in a good way, and then something that would surprise you or has surprised you in a bad way. Not mentioning any names, of course, but just curious
Of
if you
course
have
not.
any interesting stories with that. And please don't say it to me on the bad day.
For those who don't know, portfolio reviews, they happen all around the country. Lots of institutions put them on, and typically at a portfolio review, as a photographer, you can sign up and you get X number of one-on-one 20-minute sessions with different industry professionals. So within the weekend, you might sit down with a gallerist, a museum curator, a book publisher, kind of the full gamut. So it's super valuable. But
Magazine editor, yeah, all
yeah,
kinds of stuff.
magazine editor. And within a weekend as a reviewer, I'm probably sitting down with 30 different people for 20-minute sessions. So it can be kind of intense. Earlier on, there was I felt like a lot more pressure from certain people. And I don't know if it's just the way that I have started reviewing portfolios or kind of how they've educated photographers on how they should do the reviews. But there was a number I remember from the first review I ever did where I just felt kind of cornered by people, where you would just sit down with them and there was kind of this, what are you going to do for me type of mentality, which is just not a good idea. And the way I've explained it is it's the opportunity to meet somebody and establish a relationship with them and show them your work. And it has happened in my experience, but typically you're not just going to walk in, meet somebody, and they're going to give you a solo show. So I've met with enough photographers at those reviews that kind of had that energy to them where they're like, this is my work and it's done and I'm not accepting any constructive criticism, and kind of, what are you going to do for me? And that's just not a good way to really meet anybody, I don't think, in any walk of life. And a lot of the photographers I've met at those reviews, that's the beginning of the relationship, and maybe we stay in touch for a few years, and then and they're all kind of in my mental database of what people do. And then maybe I'm working on a show and I think, oh hey Daniel, I'm working on this show, so and so image would be perfect for that. This would be the story that surprised me. I had an opening coming up and I met with this person and their work was just so perfect, and I think we included them in a 3-person show maybe 2 months later. But it was just exactly what I was looking for. So you never know.
That's the thing. Yeah, it's just like, I don't know, I guess like they refer to it like kind of like speed dating. Same thing, you don't know. Like you might meet 20 people. How would you know who you're gonna like connect with or what's gonna line up? I mean, a lot of it's like you said, it's like kind of relationship building. I think with this industry in general, with everything, it's just kind of like you said, you might have that in your mental Rolodex, but it might not make sense for you or whatever. But you might have a colleague. It's like, hey, I'm doing something on cars or landscape of a specific type or of a specific process. And you'd be like, hey, Joe Smith or Sammy, whatever, she's working on this or that or whatever. And all that stuff kind of goes on in the background, I would imagine, a lot of the time.
That definitely happens. Most of us reviewers were all big enough photo geeks that even when we've been reviewing portfolios all day and maybe we're having dinner after, most of us continue to talk about it. So if you go to a portfolio review, be nice to your reviewer. And
exactly, if you're not so nice, it doesn't work.
Even if they're not an obvious fit, you never know what happens behind the scenes.
I don't know if you've heard this story, and I can't remember who it was exactly, but it's one of our colleagues. She was saying that she was doing reviews, she was reviewing, and she was in the bathroom, and somebody was trying to push work underneath the stall. Like, hey, can you like look at this? Or no, maybe it wasn't that story. It was, hey, here's my business card, and here's like a postcard or something, like underneath the stall while she was like doing her business. And like, wow.
You don't want to do that. No.
That would probably be not. Yeah, don't do it. Not a good idea, huh?
No, breaks are really valuable. So sometimes people would say, will you look at my work during your break? And a lot of times I would say no, just because I didn't think that was fair to the other people that I had appointments with, because you really need that break. But there was one time where I went to the restroom during a break and I found this photographer crying in the bathroom based upon a review she had just had. And I ended up spending my entire break trying to console this photographer in the bathroom because, I don't know, I felt bad for her.
Wait, is she the one that put the thing underneath the stall?
I don't know.
Maybe. See, because it didn't work.
Yeah,
those things can be pretty stressful. I mean, I remember the first one I went to, I was just kind of like dry mouth and like super stressed and didn't kind of know what I was doing. They have the portfolio reviews that are virtual these days. Have you done any of those?
I have. I've done 2.
That experience.
I have 2. I've done 2, and I've got one coming up soon.
San Diego, is it?
Yes.
Medium.
Yes.
I feel like for me, the portfolio review, like more important than anything, even more than like the showing of the work in some aspects, is kind of like just that face to face kind of hanging out with people over like 4 days and getting to know people. And it's like you can't assume that the one project you bring is going to really appeal to people, and that might not be, the representation of what you're going to do your whole career, right? So it's kind of like, for me, it's like that 4 days of like hanging out. It's like if it's a virtual review, you're there for 20 minutes, it cuts off. You don't even get to say goodbye probably or exchange things sometimes. I don't know how it works exactly, but and it's like you don't get that. I don't know. It just feels like it's a different experience.
I would say in the 2 that I've done so far, it's certainly not the same, but it's better than no portfolio review, I think. In terms of the actual reviewing of the work, I feel like that worked better than I expected it to. Of course, you miss the actual I love print. So being able to see the actual tactile print and actually sit at the table with the person who made the print, that is missing. But just the kind of overall, the reviews I've done so far, they really did a good job. And just there'd be this giant Zoom room. I don't even know how you would put this together, but there'd be a giant Zoom room with all the attendees in the room. And I have a lot of respect for the people that have run these things, because they've had to grab the two people that were supposed to meet up and put them in their own rooms. And
Oh, wow.
then when the time was up, like an actual portfolio review, they'd come in and ring a bell or something and say 5 minutes. So some virtual person would come in and say 5 minutes, but then they would just be gone. So if you got down to the 30 seconds, whereas a regular review, depending on the review, some regular reviews are kind of like that too, where they swoop in and remove, separate people when the time comes up. But it was definitely that way. But also just getting actually able to socialize with other people outside of the one-on-one reviews. So I guess the reviewing, I felt like that was more successful than I would expect. And then there's certain things that are nice, like you're comfortable, the coffee's good because you're in your own home. But the social aspect is not quite there. And the ones I've done, they've kind of attempted that, where they have, like I said, all the participants in one giant Zoom room. But I don't know about you, but for me, if I'm in a Zoom room with 100 people, I feel weird about saying anything. Hey, all
Your face will
100
pop up.
people,
Yeah.
I've got something to say. So I guess I'm a little shyer in a Zoom room with 100 people, or it's
Feels
just
like
harder
that'll be awkward. Yeah.
have an actual conversation. So, but what's good about them, just in terms of price point as a photographer, if anybody's looking at doing these, the virtual reviews are a lot less expensive, just in terms of the actual price point, but not traveling. So usually you have to fly to Santa Fe and get a room for 5 nights and eat and all the other expenses of traveling.
Yeah,
so
for
I would
sure.
say, if anybody out there is thinking about doing a portfolio review, I mean, online, I say go for it. Really, it's
It makes it definitely more accessible. I mean, it could be in another part of the world and not have to worry about spending a couple of grand on a flight and whatever. And also, like, probably from an anxiety standpoint, it's probably a little bit less stressful for
mhm.
everyone, because you're kind of like, you're at home, like you said, you got your favorite whatever, coffee or slippers, and kind of like in between, you don't have to like sit there and like freak out and stress out and carry a big box.
Yeah.
Sweating. You can go to your own bathroom, not have to worry about whatever. People putting cards. Well, you lose the ability to put the cards underneath the stall.
I think they've been successful enough that I think we'll continue to see some of them even post-pandemic, just for some of the reasons I mentioned, like just the accessibility.
Have you
It's
been making any artwork yourself during this time? Because I know you're normally just so busy with work and at the gallery, and now you got this new project as well with Art in the Raw.
I think, when it comes to my personal art making, or just it's more just kind of anything creative. So for me, cooking is in that category, gardening is in that category. I make photographs all the time. I may not always show them to people, but the show really has been probably outside of the work I do at the gallery, has probably been the most kind of predominant creative project that I've been engaged in, from deciding who I want to invite to be on the show, to what I might want to ask that person, to editing the video. I didn't know how to edit videos before that. So just figuring out all those details, that
Engages your mind in a creative way, right? And you're trying to put all these things together, and it's like curating or
mhm.
conceptual art, right? You're kind of creating something, right? You're moving all the pieces together and making it work in a way
Yeah,
that makes sense to you.
yeah.
Yeah. And with all the things that you're doing, that you have been doing and have done, if you weren't doing what you are doing right now, what would you be doing?
Wow.
Right? Like, well, skiing. I mean, snowboarding probably. But yeah, like, what would you?
Oh, well, on the weekend I'm definitely still snowboarding. But if I wasn't doing this, I don't know, I might be going crazy. Maybe.
If you didn't have photography, is there something else that you'd be like, I could see myself doing that, or that you'd be interested enough that you could kind of see yourself being as passionate about it, or is this it?
Well, photography is the main visual arts medium that I'm into. It's kind of my first love, but I love all of the other mediums as well. And recently I keep getting the feeling that I want to paint something, and for whatever reason, gouache gouache really speaks to me, and I don't know why, because it looks incredibly complicated, and maybe that's why I want to try it. Are you familiar with that it's kind of that style of painting? I mean, it's just,
It sounds wet.
it looks ridiculously complicated, so I don't know.
What is it? Using paintbrush and stuff, or
Yeah, it's kind of, it's similar, as I understand it, to watercolor, but it has a little more opacity to it. So it's almost kind of somewhere in between acrylic and watercolor. I think I showed you some of my drawings that I've done on wood. I
Mhm.
tend to draw trees, and I guess that's kind of where it's a little bit different with, maybe a little bit with photography versus other mediums. When I tend to draw and paint, I'm pretty comfortable just sitting down and just starting to sketch or draw something without thinking about what it's actually going to be. Whereas I guess photography, you've loaded your film or you have your camera, and you're kind of going out and planning to photograph something, or maybe not. Maybe you're just
Yeah.
walking the dog and you see something and you pull out your iPhone and make a picture. But trees are always a common, there's probably more trees in my artwork than anything else.
Now, where does that come from?
So like I said, I grew up in Colorado. I moved to Denver when I was 9, but the first 9 years of my life, I lived on top of a ridge top in the mountains in Colorado. And so I'm pretty sure that's what it was. As a kid, I was playing amongst the trees. We'd camp in the backyard. We made forts in trees. Even in, I remember moving to Denver and being in middle school, and you had to get on the bus really early in the morning. Did they do that to you in Canada? Send you to school before the sun even came up?
No,
Why did they do that? But they did. But I remember
that
being on the
sucks.
school bus early in the morning and just observing the silhouettes of the trees as kind of the sun was rising, and just loving that. For me, I think a lot of kind of early childhood memories kind of influence the type of art that I want to create.
And does that bring you, like, when you were a kid looking at that, that give you kind of a feeling of mystery or a feeling of like comfort, or what do you think it was that was kind of like drawing you to that?
I think it was just pure fascination. Didn't know why. I was a kid, didn't have to think about it too hard. Just,
Yeah,
but I
cool.
still look at silhouettes of trees and I love it.
So another thing that I understand that you're in love with would be music. Would
Hmm.
that be correct? And I remember listening to a previous episode where your professor was at the same concert. It was like an Insane Clown Posse concert or something. I'm like, oh no, is he going to notice I'm going to get to class late tomorrow morning or something?
Yeah, that was David Scheinbaum. He photographed hip hop concerts for quite some time. I've never been to an Insane Clown Posse concert, but when I was in college, a lot of the hip hop shows I went to in Albuquerque, he was at and up on stage photographing. And it was fun to talk to him about that recently on Art in the Raw, because he didn't know I was there.
Your
Um,
student, your professors, are like, oh crap. I don't know, you just be like,
Yeah. I was like, well,
gonna get
he
in
was there
trouble.
too. It was a Public Enemy show that I remember.
Nice. And were your parents into music? I mean, is that something that kind of came on early on in life, or just
That would be
go
my
love
dad.
your
That's
dad?
definitely my dad. Yeah. He's always been a musician in my mind, but he's more been like he's never really been interested in playing shows or anything like that. It's more just kind of jamming out in the basement when I was a kid. Or
Cool.
maybe he'd have a friend come over and play some music. Or we used to play music together a little bit
Hmm.
when I was a kid, but music is not necessarily one of my talents. Or it could be I've just never to really get good at anything, you've really got to put a lot of effort
Yeah,
into it. He and my brother, I always thought were just really kind of naturally talented in the musical arts, and I couldn't do that. So I kind of went in other directions. Just
fair.
in terms of owning music, I don't know if you saw the episode last week with my friend Rob Danson, he's in LA and he's in a
Yes, yes.
band. And I was talking to Rob, and I mean, this I felt like it was such a dorky moment, but I was talking about cassette tapes I had recorded when I was 5 years old, or that I'd collected when I was 5 years old. And I was saying, oh yeah, I bought this cassette tape and that. And then I had this moment where I realized, wait a minute, yeah, I was five. I didn't have money. Like my dad bought those for me. So he was definitely my musical influence.
So what was your first cassette?
My first cassette tape was the soundtrack to the movie Labyrinth
Oh,
with David
David
Bowie.
Bowie. Cool
Um,
dad.
very cool dad. And then I had Tiffany and Taylor Dane and George Michael. So yeah, I guess my dad was the musical influence and my mom was the visual arts influence on me.
That's awesome. And they both obviously influenced you in that way. So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, so I love music. I'm interested in music, but I don't play music.
When you cook, are you following recipes? Or are you kind of like doing your own thing? Or are you like kind of starting off with the recipe and kind of jumping off from there?
Usually I do not follow recipes, with the exception of I got one of those Instapots about a
Mm.
year ago. So I will check recipes just in terms of cook time for that kind of thing, because I'm not gonna just try to make up how long you should pressure cook a whole chicken. That doesn't
It could be a surprise. Too tough tonight, too soft tomorrow. Yeah.
yeah, but in terms of seasoning and just inventing things, good question, by the way. And I always add extra garlic. I always add extra garlic and
Yeah.
maybe onion and definitely green chili.
I was gonna say spicy.
Hmm.
Like playing with spice.
Add the
So what
spice.
kind of heat do you use? You'll use the the peppers. The what are they called again? The New Mexican peppers that
Well,
you
New
use. The
Mexico
chilies.
chili is
That's the
definitely
best one.
definitely an addiction. I love all kinds of spices.
Do you use
But
anything else for heat, or is that pretty much your main kind of source for heat when you're cooking?
I love different hot sauces as well. I've got a little collection of those. I also have some dried chilies that I'll dehydrate sometimes. I worked at this great Mexican restaurant early on, called Mucho Gusto, still around in Santa Fe. It's awesome, little family owned and operated restaurant. They did things like they would make their own mole sauce from scratch. And if you know about mole, it can have 80 ingredients in it or something like that. So I would watch the owner there dehydrate all these chilies and make these wild sauces. So when it comes to cooking, I like to take a lot of chances.
I share that philosophy. I'm the same way. I'm not a recipe person. Sometimes I'll be like, okay, I'm trying to make something. It's like, what are kind of like the main things that would go into this? Because it's like today I was telling you, we made some banana sponsors. I'm like, I made this like a long time ago. It's like it's
Mhm.
bananas, I think rum, maybe some sugar. I don't know. Can you just check that real quick? Okay, we're good. We don't have sugar. We'll throw in some honey. We don't have banana liqueur. We'll put in some Malibu. That'll work. Some butter. Okay, good.
Yeah.
The thing that I have to stop myself is when I'm cooking is that I keep on like adding, like I like to have a lot of layers of stuff. So I'll just kind of like, I'll add this spice, add some more cumin. I'll be like, make a curry, like put in some curry powder and some this spice and that spice. And it's like getting perfect. You're like, oh, this is like, it's jamming. And you kind of like, maybe just this other thing too. And then you go and you're like, damn it. It's like it's like you were there and you just kind of went over there and I'm like, oh man, it just like totally ruined it. Yeah.
Well, and I think that's like visual arts too. Like, how do you know when you're done?
Yeah.
With the thing, having that
Yeah.
like, kind of in discipline or intuition or whatever it is to
Hmm.
okay, stop, see what happens, or do you keep going?
And then another thing that I know that you're kind of into is film. So I know in your last episode you're talking about horror film. Is that like a genre that you really kind of gravitate towards, or?
I like a lot of different genres, but I'm definitely into scary movies. I feel like in watching movies, it's kind of a nice balance between different types of movies, maybe what's going on in your life. I'm also a big fan of comedy movies and gangstery, heisty movies as well for whatever reason. I like them all.
I'm not too much into the scary stuff. I don't know. I've never really been into it. I guess it's scary.
You know
Yeah.
why I love those types of movies is
Yeah.
I of all of the different genres, like maybe you don't like kind of gangstery, heisty movies, so you just don't watch them. But I
Mhm.
found people don't have that kind of like, I don't know, they don't have that reaction when you say, "Oh, I'm really into horror movies." People kind of go, "Ooh," like if they're not into it, they're really not into it. Versus maybe you don't like the heist movie, you're like, "Yeah, I don't really like that." So I don't know why I'm drawn to that genre.
My roommate in college is like, he still makes films, but he's like true horror, like fanatic, like low budget, crazy stuff. And I was like at some of his films, and I think I was just kind of like turned off at that point to it. I don't know. It was pretty bad. Love the guy, but it was just like, yeah, I was pretty bad. I should say his stuff was pretty good, but
Like
yeah,
I'll be going to bed early tonight.
yeah. I think I got into trouble once. My sister, we watched, I think it was a Candyman or something, or no, it's Friday the 13th. I can't remember. Like when we were growing up, and my sister was like freaked out by it, which I thought was great. But then she had to sleep with my parents for like a week, and they got in so much trouble. So I'm like, no more horror movies. So on a Friday night, what movie genre would you go for if you had like a choice? Like this weekend, what would you watch? Would you have anything in mind?
I think it depends on the week that I've had. I think it's
Makes
just
sense.
kind of a
Yeah,
good way to balance whatever else is going on.
kind of like music, right? I mean, yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
exactly. Sometimes
And
I'm maybe,
food.
yeah, sometimes I'm working and I'm just feeling kind of low energy and just changing the music is what needs to happen.
It's
So, okay,
incredible, isn't it?
I can work for another 5 hours. I just can't
Yeah.
what I was listening to before.
Put in some Tiffany Cassette. Think we're alone now.
Yeah, I gotta say, I've definitely not listened to Tiffany in a very long time, but Talia Kosh, who was on a few episodes recently, you got to be in you were part of the social hour episode with her, but she was on an episode with Corey Williamson, which was when I learned that she actually went to a Tiffany concert. She told us that story.
What was your first concert that you went to?
That I don't actually remember.
Hmm.
I've been to a lot of concerts. Of the more memorable concerts, I guess I would say got to I went to an Aerosmith show when I was an early teenager, and that was particularly memorable because we had lawn seats, and some guy that worked for the venue offered us front row center seats,
Nice.
I and then we got backstage passes and we got to meet
What?
the band, and so that was memorable. And then I also got to go to
Wow.
the last tour that Pink Floyd did in 1994. That was super amazing.
Wow.
Michael Kershaw and I figured out on episode 1 of Art in the Raw that he also was at that tour but in LA.
Wow.
And I think we figured out we both still have our concert tickets, and we both paid, I think the tickets were $24 or something like that, which is funny now, because now it would be probably, well,
Zero out of zero.
well, and Pink Floyd's not even touring anymore, so
Yeah.
if they did, it would be, yeah, maybe add a few more zeros. But so many good shows over the years, from just little hole in the wall venues in Denver to big amphitheaters.
I feel like I almost enjoy those. Like kind of like you go to a place and there's a live band and you're not expecting it and you're like really into it and you're kind of like, that was like something I wasn't expecting. You
Yeah.
just get out there and act a fool and dance and just have a good time.
Another show that I should note is, I don't, are you into reggae? I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Pato
Mhm.
Banton.
I'm not sure. I'd have to hear the song.
I'm sending you a link to Pato Banton later.
Yes,
So
please.
he's a pretty well-known contemporary reggae artist, but is not opposed to playing at little venues. So I've seen Pato Banton a few times in little bars in Santa Fe. I mean, packed houses, but he's a guy who could pack an amphitheater, but just to see him in a little bar. And then a thing he does is he'll sometimes do these little prayer circles outside of the venue later on. I mean, he's just that musician where you could run up to him after the show and give him a hug and talk to him for a little while, and he's into it. So some of
He
the
hasn't
shows.
lost that essence. So he hasn't forgotten where he's come from. That's awesome.
And then Ozo Motley. Do you know Ozo Motley? Okay, I'm also
Great
sending you
name though.
Ozo Motley because you'll love Ozo Motley.
Hmm.
They're another band that could probably pack an amphitheater, but will play little venues, and they have this tendency to, towards the end of the show, they have a lot of horns usually within the band, and they'll usually walk around, and they'll play free shows sometimes too, and they'll walk around in the crowd after the show still playing.
No, it's awesome.
And I got to see them in Taos. And I think this was a free show, or it was at least an inexpensive show. They played with War.
Wow. And they're reggae? Yeah, this band that you're talking about, the Ozo.
Describe them as kind of fusion, Latin, kind of reggae, kind of hip hop. They played this whole show with War, and a number of the songs were collaborative. That was truly amazing.
So artwork. You're all over the place with, painting and photography, and you got like all these music, you're covering all these wonderful artists and obviously a lot of interest in all of it. If you had, what would be your desert island piece that you could, if money was no objective, what would you get that you can think of that you've been like kind of thinking about for a while, or you hadn't thought about it because it was just so out of reach? Or
There,
maybe not. Maybe it's super affordable. You just haven't gotten it.
there's too many pieces, but
Yeah.
I think if money was no object,
Hmm.
it would be one of Man Ray's photographs.
Which one? Do you know?
I don't have a particular one in mind. I think some of the kind of more surreal, kind of Dadaist style. I mean, he has a lot of different types
Hmm.
of photographs, but I would really love to have one of those. But I've come to realize in terms of artwork, I tend to gravitate to artwork that's kind of a little bit surreal or in the magic realism genre. There's maybe something a little daunting within the image, something a little bit mysterious, but kind of from medium to medium, I'm really into that. Since we're making this up, yeah, I would love to have a dolly. That would be amazing.
Uh-huh.
The more I've made this show, I
Mhm.
kind of want to collect art by everybody that's on the show. But I also have that challenge in working at the gallery. Don Hung Oi. Do you know Don Hung Oi's
Mhm.
photography?
I
Uh,
might be familiar with it, but I'm not familiar with the name.
he's he's one of my favorites, and actually the first I don't know, I guess I'd say serious piece of art I bought was one of his pieces. He works within the photo montage process, but within the darkroom, or he did anyways. He was a Chinese photographer that grew up in Vietnam and immigrated to San Francisco in, I think, 1979 or so. And so he shot all 8x10 negatives, and he would make these composite compositions from multiple 8x10 negatives that were sandwiched together in the darkroom. And so he'd make multiples of every piece, but there'd be little variations. A lot of them were compositions from the River Lee. And I had the opportunity to see multiple prints of some of these images, but sometimes the boat would be going the other direction, or he'd use a different negative of a tree. And then he would also kind of paint little extra details. That was really what inspired me for that to be my first piece. Is I saw this one that just really, really just spoke to me in terms of the toning, the composition, and I knew it was going to be the only one like that. And I couldn't even afford it at the time, but I was able to make payment arrangements, and I bought it, and I love it so much. Since he passed away, and because he was printing from multiple glass plate negatives, there are not necessarily trust prints. You couldn't just hire somebody to make the trust prints. And since then, the woman who ran his trust, Ruth Silverman, she's also passed away. And before that happened, she donated the last of his prints to I believe it's the Santa Barbara Art Museum. And the woman who ran Ruth's trust got in touch with me, and we sold off the last of our inventory. All the proceeds went to different nonprofits. Ruth was really into animals, specifically dogs. So I got to sell the last of his prints from our inventory, and I got to pick a nonprofit for the proceeds to go to. And that was amazing and kind of equally rewarding to see the last of Don Hongoi's prints go to a good place. But I also love dogs, so to pick a local organization for those to go to.
That's kind of a nice arc. It's a nice arc to that, right? Like, that's pretty cool. Wow.
And I loved his work before I even worked at Photo Eye. I admired it from afar. And when I started there about 15 years ago, I think was when we first started consigning prints. And it was one of my first duties when I first started working there, was to pick some. I was the gallery assistant at the time. I'm now the gallery director. I was supposed to pick prints to order for our inventory.
That sounds fun.
That was definitely a special thing. Still is.
You're like, I get to order these and I get to live with them.
Yeah. I don't really see myself as just somebody that sells photography, but it's more connecting collectors with pieces that they truly love, and sometimes by artists that they don't know. So for me, it's that kind of rewarding thing of connecting the collector with the artist.
That's kind of like a special skill and artistic practice as well, right? Just kind of trying to figure out that match, right?
It definitely is, because sometimes it's okay, you're just telling a collector, okay, this person has new art, but what I think sometimes people don't think about is I go, okay, you like this. And that's one thing I don't love about Amazon. I feel like Amazon kind of like makes what I do less, I don't know, it's different. Like Amazon through algorithms will be like, you ordered a fish tank filter yesterday, maybe you want this other fish tank filter. So it's kind of what I do, but as a human. It's more like, hey, Daniel, you own a Don Hongoi print. I just met this photographer, Sally X. Pretty sure if you like the Don Hongoi, you're going to like Sally's work. And she's an emerging artist, and you should check this out. It's about more than just selling art. It's those connections between people. That's what keeps me doing it, really.
It's probably rewarding too if you have someone who's never collected before and they come in and they're just kind of checking stuff out and they get excited about something and they realize they can afford it, because photography is pretty accessible, right? And it's kind of like, who knows, maybe that person hangs out in their house and then that becomes 2 or 3 different things, and then kind of set them on a different path that they hadn't expected because they walked into the gallery and met Anne on a Sunday or Saturday or whatever the hours are.
Yeah, and I love that. And there's some people that think, oh, collecting is not accessible, or they're embarrassed to walk in and admit they don't know about it, or that they only have a certain budget. But I mean, that's something I really love, is if you walked in and said my budget is this amount of money and this is the type of thing I like, I love to help figure out what that's going to be. And not that all photographs are inexpensive, but for example, in terms of other photographers that I would maybe aspire to own their print, I would love to have a Jerry Uelsmann. And that is way more realistic than obtaining a Dali painting, for example. Or even, yeah. I mean, a lot of Ansel Adams prints are really expensive, but I'm getting an Ansel Adams is more likely than getting a Monet.
Anything quirky that you collect that would be interesting that one wouldn't normally think of? Because then that's a question you regularly ask your interviewees.
I would say most of the things I collect kind of relate to other hobbies. So, for example, snowboarding. I guess I have a small collection of snowboards. Maybe I don't need as many snowboards as I have, but they're for different reasons.
Yeah.
And I also have a 55-gallon fish tank. So I collect fish that are in the fish tank.
And was this because you had those carnival fish and nobody won them and you've just been kind of like taking care of them all these years?
You know, the pet collecting thing, I think probably. Yeah, okay. I've always when I was a kid, I had a lot of pets. I had guinea pigs, I had fish, I had frogs, dogs. Now I just have 2 dogs in the 55-gallon fish tank. So I think the carnival fish were just a result of
So how many fish are in your 55-gallon swimming pool size fish tank?
I don't know at this point. That's the weird thing with fish tanks. There's this whole like it's more like how many inches of fish per gallon can you have in the tank and have the tank be healthy. I guess I have 55 inches of fish. I forget what the rule is. But, I have a red shark and some loaches, yo-yo loaches they call them, and some tiger barbs. So it's mostly a barb loach and shark tank right now.
I don't know what a barb loach is, but it sounds pretty badass, especially if you can live in the 55-gallon fish tank with the shark.
I mean, the shark.
Yeah, sure.
About that
the shark's a shark, though.
And then jewelry. I love jewelry. That's something I've always loved. Wearing the.
I was gonna say I'm appreciating your.
These were made by Danny Hart Design. He was on the show. He went to architecture school and also makes furniture and jewelry, and
cool.
He's a really cool guy. I think you'll enjoy that episode. Ever since I was a kid, I've been collecting jewelry. Like when I babysat, I spent all my money at Claire's Boutique. And I don't know if you had that in Canada, but it was like
I'm at the malls here. I've seen them before.
Yeah. So you can picture like 8-year-old me blowing my babysitting budget.
You're like, can I trade this Tiffany tape in for that thing?
Yes. Yes. Now it's like Danny Hart Design, handmade.
Nice. Is it wood?
It is, yeah. And
wow.
His jewelry is really cool. When I bought these, I had the option of picking between, I think, 4 different types of wood because he hand makes them per order. And then they always just have this little pop of color. So I got to pick the wood and then the color of them. So
it just kind of like catches your eye every once in a while when it moves around.
Yeah. So I've got 2 pairs of his earrings now, and since I talked to him last week, I learned that he uses that Japanese technique where you burn wood to make it so that it is so that it's black, but also it's waterproof at that point. You see that a lot in architecture.
Hmm.
And I've always been fascinated with that process. And he was like, "Oh yeah, all of my black jewelry, I use that." And he showed me a few pairs. I'm like, now,
Some new
so I've
packages coming in the mail.
I've already, well, I haven't actually bought the 3rd pair of earrings yet, but I have in my mind. It's already happened. So
One of the black ones, I'm assuming.
yes, yeah, just I don't know. I love process and just knowing that was part of the process, and then
Yeah.
it's
It's kind of
happening.
something that it's kind of like that picture that you bought, right? Where you knew that there was like, sure, there's an addition of 10 or whatever it was, but each one of them had these little variations. It's almost like these little secrets that he knew about the person that bought it doesn't know. And you knew, and you get to have it, and you kind of have this like little thing, it's a little secret.
Definitely.
Okay, so pandemic's raging still, hope is on the horizon. What's like the first place that you want to go to that you can drive to? And then like what's the first place you want to go to that you can fly to?
The flying to place is going to be Japan, and specifically during the winter, because snowboarding is one of my passions, and the snow they get in Japan is just epic. And then also, have you heard about this? They have the the monkeys that get in the hot springs there.
Yes, I've seen the picture of them. They're like in the hot tub and they're like full of snow or whatever, snow monkeys, whatever they're called.
Yeah, yeah. So I want to snowboard all day, and then I want to hang out in the hot springs with the
Wait,
monkeys.
you can go into the hot springs with the monkeys?
I mean, unless
That's
the
you.
monkeys don't like it, then
They're probably like, yeah, you got to come after we leave. It's our time. That'd be
yeah.
pretty amazing though if you could.
Other than that, my family is of Irish descent, so Ireland is a place I've always wanted to go to. It would be higher on the list if I didn't want to snowboard Japan so badly, but Ireland is definitely up there. In terms of, you asked about just somewhere I can drive. Have you heard of Truth or Consequences, New Mexico? That's
No,
actually
it
the
sounds
name of the town.
really.
Truth or Consequences, yes. And what it has in common
Wow.
with Japan is the hot springs. There's tons of hot springs there. So it's this little teeny tiny town of, and that's somewhere I think I can probably realistically go to sooner than later.
Mhm.
So there's public hot springs you can go to there, but there's also little hotels that have hot springs, but there's a lot of little Airbnbs that have hot spring fed hot tubs in their backyard, because you can just pipe into it.
Right.
So that's actually something I've been wanting to do.
How
So I
long a drive is that? A couple hours or?
think it's just about 2 hours or so. So that's doable.
That
Particularly
sounds,
having your own Airbnb with your private hot spring and
yeah.
all of that. That's like the ideal pandemic getaway, it seems to
Oh, yeah.
me.
With your own hot spring. Yeah. That'll kill off the germs. You're good to go.
So many great places to go. But
Soon.
in the meantime, maybe we all meet up in Truth or Consequences. Thank you, Daniel. I managed, I think, to let you ask questions, and I resisted the temptation to ask all of the questions that were in my mind. I guess it came in handy that we spoke a few weeks ago. But for those of you watching, thank you. Thank you very much. We appreciate all of you, and please like, comment, and subscribe. And I gotta say, you always hear people say that on YouTube. It's like, it's almost that thing you don't even hear anymore because you just hear it so much, but it really does make a difference. Daniel spent time preparing for the show. I do that on a weekly basis, and it helps to know that people are watching and are interested to keep us doing this.
She wants to see you comment down below. Say some good stuff.
And if any of you have questions for me, put the comments below, or for Daniel, or even from anybody else from past episodes. We will try to answer those questions. Thank you. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you. Thank you.
Episode 24. Have a good night, everybody.